All right, next up we have our sense of hearing. So we're going to start off with the anatomy and physiology of the ear. In order to hear, the ear is going to be responsible for collecting and amplifying sound waves that are produced by vibrations. The loudness of the sound is going to be determined by the amplitude of the sound wave, whereas the pitch of the sound is determined by the frequency of the sound wave. So the outer ear is going to be responsible for collecting that information. This is going to serve as our receiver. It's going to gather all of those sound waves and funnel them into our sensory systems. So this portion of the outer ear is made up of the pinna and the external auditory canal. Here is that region right here. So here's our pinna, that's going to be the part that you can see, and the external auditory canal, sort of the hole inside of your ear. The pinna is that giant floppy portion on the outside of your head. What do you suppose its purpose is? Yeah, that's the funnel. That's what's going to collect all the sound. That's the receiver. It's going to collect all that sound and funnel it in through that through the external auditory canal. The external auditory canal channels all of those sound waves into the tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane is the eardrum. This is going to be the region that separates the outer ear from the middle ear. The tympanic membrane is going to vibrate at the same frequency as the sound waves and transfer those vibrations to the middle ear. Now you have to have nearly equal pressure on both sides in order to operate or to vibrate properly. And so in order to maintain that pressure, we're going to use the auditory tube. That's this region down here. So the external auditory canal is going to be out here. That's part of the outer ear. It goes from the outside world to the tympanic membrane. The auditory tube, or the eustachian tube, connects down with our lower jaw bones. Now, if you remember when we talked about the skeletal system and we talked about the muscular system, we talked about the cranium, this eustachian tube or auditory tube is what's responsible for connecting up with the back of your mouth and your inner ear. This is what allows you to, if you, experience your ears have popped, you have a disproportionate amount of pressure between the inside of your and the outside of your ear. This is why when your ears pop, it can be difficult to hear properly. So you can fix this by yawning or chewing gum. Or I like to just sort of massage that outer region of my ear to try and open up that auditory tube. So that auditory canal, external auditory canal is going to be lined with hairs and modified sweat glands that secrete earwax. This is going to help protect against foreign matter. If you remember way on back when we talked about the different types of biomolecules, we talked about earwaxes, we talked about cerumen, and it actually has an insecticide feature that's going to repel insects, keep them out of crawling in your ears, which are warm and dark and moist. So it'll guard against the entrance of foreign matter, so that earwax and those hairs. Moving in from that, we have the middle ear. The middle ear is going to begin at the tympanic membrane, and it's going to end at a bony wall that contains two smaller openings, also covered by membranes. So that's going to be this portion right in here. So here we have our outer ear, our middle ear, and then our inner ear. So this region right here, we have a membrane on this side and a membrane on that side. The round openings of those smaller regions are referred to as the oval window and the round window. Now, in the region of the middle ear, we have three different ossicles. Those are going to be small bones that are going to be responsible for transmitting that information from the tympanic membrane, from the eardrum, to the oval window. There are three bones. They are named for their shapes. So this is one of the things that we like to do with our bones, our skeletal system. We name them for their size, their location, their shape, whatever. These are named for their shape. We have the malleus, because it's shaped like a hammer. It's going to actually touch the tympanic membrane. So that's going to be this one right here. It touches the tympanic membrane, and when this membrane vibrates, it's going to cause this malleus to knock up and down. It's going to knock up and down against this middle ear right here. Against that bone right there in the middle ear. The one it knocks against is called the incus, which is just a word for anvil. So it's kind of like a hammer on an anvil. We're going to be knocking against that anvil. The last one is known as the stapes. This is the stirrup. Now the stirrup is going to touch and connect to the oval window right in here. This is what's going to be responsible for transmitting that information from the outside world into our sense organ. So up until now, we just have had vibrational waves. If it weren't for this oval window, so if you were to stop everything right here, you would hear no sound. Your bones would be vibrating, but you're not going to actually hear any sound or process that sound. This organ right here is going to be responsible for transmitting that information to your brain. All right, so that's going to be the inner ear. One last thing I want to say, so here's just some notes about that auditory tube or the eustachian tube, or you may hear it referred to as the pharyngotympanic tube. It's going to be responsible for connecting the middle ear to the nasopharynx. This is what's going to equalize that pressure across the tympanic membrane. So that's the middle ear. Moving inward, we're going to move into that inner ear, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that inner ear, so don't worry, we don't have a lot of notes for it right now, but we'll get into it. So the outer ear and the middle ear contain air. The inner ear, however, is going to be filled with fluid in 3 specific areas. We have semicircular canals and the vestibule, which are responsible for handling our balance and equilibrium, and then we have the cochlea, which handles our hearing. So the ear is responsible for multiple things. Our inner ear is responsible for not only allowing us to hear and process sound information, but also responsible for helping us maintain our equilibrium. All right, so we're going to break those down, and we're going to talk about the cochlea. We're going to talk about the organ of Corti and helping maintain our equilibrium. All right, but this is the way that we are able to process sound. So this is the auditory pathway to the brain. The sound waves are going to strike against that tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane is going to vibrate. That vibration causes that malleus to beat up and down. It beats up and down against the incus, which vibrates the stapes. Now the stapes is going to pass that information on to the oval window. So the basic point of those ossicles is to amplify that sound vibration. We are taking the information, the vibrations from this very large tympanic membrane, and we are transferring them, amplifying and transferring them to a very, very small oval window. This allows us to amplify those vibrations. When we strike against that oval window, it causes that oval window to vibrate, and that passes the pressure on to the fluid within the cochlea. Now, it's going to be the changes in that pressure, the pressure in that fluid, that's going to be translated into sound. We're going to be moving from vibrations into electrical impulses that can be recognized and processed by the brain. So the cochlea has 3 specific canals through which it's going to perform all of these different features. So what we have right here are going to be the 3 semicircular canals. This is that upper branching part of the cochlea. So this is going to be the spiral organ, or the organ of Corti, is going to be the sense for hearing. This will be located in the cochlear canal. Now what we have is here's a little cross section of what that looks like. So in that cochlear canal, the basilar membrane is going to move up and down. So that'll be the membrane right here is going to move up and down in response to changes in pressure. When it moves up and down, it's going to bend these little hairs. When it bends those stereocilia, it's going to bend them against the tectoral membrane. When it bends them against that membrane, it's going to send a signal along our nerve fibers, along the cochlear nerve, travel it up to the auditory cortex in the temporal lobe, which is going to then interpret it as sound. So it's going to be the changes in the pressure is going to cause this membrane to move up and down, which is going to cause these hairs to bend, which is going to send that signal, that nerve impulse along the cochlear nerve, where it's going to then be transmitted into a message in the brain. Each part of the spiral organ is going to be sensitive to a different wave frequencies or a different pitch. So the tip of the spiral organ responds to very, very low pitches. So that would be this region right down in here, very, very low, deep pitches. The regions out here is going to respond to higher pitches. The nerve fibers in each region is going to lead to different areas of the auditory cortex, which is going to allow you to interpret that pitch. So here is just going to be an amplified version, so you can actually see what's going on. So volume is going to function a little bit differently than the amplitude, or a little bit differently than the pitch of the sound waves. Loud noises cause the fluid within the vestibular canal to exert more pressure. So what's going to happen is the pitch. So if it's a really high pitch, we're going to stimulate out here. If it's a very low pitch, we're going to stimulate deeper in or further on. But the loudness of the pitch, the volume of the pitch, is stimulated all along the entire cochlea based on the amount of pressure. So loud noises cause the fluid within the vestibular canal to exert more pressure on the basilar membrane and vibrate it to even greater extent. So we're going to see even more vibration. We're going to see even more deflection of these hair cells, and we're going to see more stimulation of those nerve fibers that's going to send that information to the brain. All right, so that's sort of our sense of hearing. We're going to have a separate section that's going to go over the sense of equilibrium, which is also controlled by our inner ear. But at this point, you should be able to identify the structures of the ear involved in hearing and provide the function of each. So you should be able to go through the main structures of the outer ear, middle ear, and inner ear. And then you should be able to describe the role of mechanoreceptors in the sense of hearing and summarize just very briefly how the spiral organ translates sound waves into nerve impulses.